the smart person who doesn't work hard, who tries to put on the facade that they work hard. That's the worst, because it's like you skipped the vital step here. Because if you do the vital step, the other thing can kind of just take care of itself.
Yeah.
Right. Like then you don't have to put effort into making it look like you work hard. You have to put effort into kind of making it look like you don't. That's where the magic is like you work hard. You don't really pay attention to put any effort into the optic of what you do, and you make an impact. It's just like, I think now with obviously social media is there's a currency in the personification of hard work, right? And it's like, I'm okay with that if the personification of hard work comes by the way of hard work, right? Like if you're on social media and you're doing things that are hard and you're actually doing them, then hats off to you. But if you're on social media pretending to do things that are hard and you're just fucking lazy, but you want people to think you're hardworking, then I think you should crawl in a shallow grave and die. Because it's just like, and that's more people than I think otherwise, right? I don't think people understand effort. They just don't like. It's like when you train with someone and they get like 5 reps to failure, they stop and they go, "It hurt," and you're like, "Yes, exactly." That right? Like, oh, I got tired. It's like, okay, do things you don't want to do when you least want to do them, and I think that's a pretty good proxy for effort. And if you do that enough times, just by the definition of like the fact that most people don't do that, you will get places that other people don't get.
Mm-hmm. So in your mind, what's the intersection of hard work and discipline? Because that also sounds like it could be a plausible definition of discipline.
Yeah, discipline's a tough one because I think Paul Ekman put up this thing years ago, and it stuck with me ever since. And I don't think it was his, but I forget who he credited for it. We're like, discipline doesn't exist. It's a balance of things you love, right? So the you use the word feeling, like you made the comparison to like, how do you want to feel, or what do you want to feel? There's a mode of philosophy called emotivism, which basically like strips everything down to just that, right? Like there's no such thing as good or bad or ethics or morals. There's just like, I net feel better doing this. It's like I net feel better, you know, calling my mom versus not, right? It's not like an ethical thing. It's just like my emotions are really what are driving all of my behaviors. So it's kind of this like mode of philosophy. So I think like with the idea of discipline, like David Goggins clearly likes yelling about running and calling people bitches from the street onto the camera. Then he likes the idea of, kicking his feet up on the couch, right? That to him that's emotivism at play. So he's not disciplined. He's just he's feeding this emotional algorithm that leaves him in a place that he prefers to be. So like discipline to me is just a balance of that, right? Like if I am currently in the mindset that the idea of having a 12 pack is uh more satisfying to me mentally than eating a bunch of cake, then I'll just not eat the cake, right? And whoever makes that decision, or however that decision gets made by an individual, is just an expression of their underlying emotions, not their underlying discipline. So like I really subscribe to that axiom of discipline, that when you are faced with a decision and one seems more difficult than the other, whatever decision you make, the fork in the road, is ultimately decided by a net emotional state. That the abstinence of doing a particular thing or the indulgence in doing a particular thing carries with it an emotion that you favor. So I really think, and it's just another fucking unbelievably generic piece of content on the internet, which like doesn't have to exist, is this idea of like, motivation or discipline and blah blah blah. Like stop, stop. Everyone needs to stop making that fucking post because it really, I think there is, to your point earlier, like there's a deeper psychological component to it that is driving it, right? Like
Mhm.
in the situation that you pressed me on the question, it's like I think it's the same thing. It's like motivation or discipline. Like motivation doesn't last, and discipline. But like, what are you talking about? We're dealing with human beings here. Like there is, it's we are emotional social creatures. The all you need to do is to figure out a way to have the outcome closer tied to an emotion that's favorable to the person, and then whatever veneer you want to put in front of it, whether it's motivation or discipline, doesn't really matter because it's the outcome of the emotion that's elicited by the behavior that's going to indicate whether or not the behavior occurred. It's classic learning, right? It's Pavlovian. Ring a bell and I salivate. Like it's the if you associate a positive outcome with the thing that you think is hard and that drives your emotion, that's going to be what drives your decision, right? So I'm not like, for me, and because motivation is two pronged, and motivation and discipline, I know are cross pollinating here, but motivation is running towards something while running away from something, right? Like the old study with the rat and the cheese and the cat, right? So you put like a, have you heard about this? Do you know this study?
Not the study. I'm familiar with the principle though.
Yeah, they like tied basically they tied a rat's tail to a spring that had measured the force in which it was pulling. They put it in a cage and they put cheese on the other side, and it like kind of pulled pretty hard towards the cheese because it wants cheese. And then they put another rat in another cage, same setup, but they fanned in the scent of a cat and then watched the fucking thing run that much more. So you're going towards something that you want while running away from something that you don't, right? That's the essence of motivation. So it's like when you're trying to like what are those two things for people? What are they running away from? What do they fear? And what do they move towards for? What are they driven to? What is the positive emotion that they want,
Yeah.
right? So it's like it's balancing those two things in a way where they act according to that balance of moving away from negative emotion and moving towards positive emotion. So
Yeah.
it's like, but I think one thing, and I was talking to my a friend of mine earlier about this, is when you've had near death experiences or you've been in actual physical danger, I think it's a really good calibration tool because I'm like a pretty, and I think everyone is, but like the idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Sort of this pyramid of ascension. And there's these different levels. And the base level is like, the need for survival. You have water, you have food, shelter. You're not getting fucking, you're not on the south side of Chicago. You're not getting shot at every day. And then it kind of gets a little bit more ethereal as you go up, right? And at the top, a need for some sort of like legacy or self actualization or fulfillment. If you haven't traversed to the bottom of that hierarchy, and you've never been in situations where you're like, I don't know, dog, like it's pretty rough out there. It's pretty bleak. You may convince yourself that the higher, more ethereal levels of needs are, if you feel like you're going, like if you are in a social setting and you, um, I don't know, like I think of people who've gotten canceled on the internet, right? Said some dumb shit, did some dumb shit. Fuck, there was a camera there or someone was recording it. I've seen people handle this very differently. I've seen people who it's absolutely toppled them and they've to which they've never returned. And I see people who brush it off and it's kind of a joke. And I'm sure some people in the social media world can think of a few cases of this quite recently. And it's one thing that is consistent amongst the reaction of people who get canceled and how they navigate it is people who have been in actual real danger don't give a fuck because they know that some sort of like social canceling, that death is at a higher level of need. And they've been down to the lowest level. They go, oh, people are going to not follow my Instagram account? Like, am I going to die? No. But people who've never had that, like, you know, back up against the wall feeling quite literally, that's their death. That then they think they cease to exist. Like if someone gets their Instagram hacked or canceled or whatever, they don't know that there's another level. If you don't have exposure to that, right? So for me, it's like, how to back to your original question about like, discipline or motivation. It's understanding that some people's fear, the fear of, let's use like the getting canceled analogy, or let's stick with that. That's like someone putting a gun to your head, right? Like, if you think like, oh, this is end of days, like, yeah, dude, I'll give you my wallet, I'll give you whatever. Like, I'll make that Faustian deal with the devil if I think I'm actually going to die. But if someone's like, oh, I'm going to cancel your Instagram account, like, okay, like, ooh. But if you haven't had the barrel in your mouth before, you're you're gonna react like that's the barrel in your mouth, right? And so it's like figuring out, okay, what is that fear for someone that they need to be motivated to move, or incentivized to move away from, and what are they chasing? What's that next level, right?
Right.
For me, early days it was easy, and I know you're the same. It's like, I don't want to be poor and hungry.
Yeah.
I want to move away from that. I want to move towards food. Like, it was literally like, I want to move towards having dumb problems. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it's like the whole concept of loss aversion, right? I think it's more impactful for people to have the perception of losing something they've already obtained than it is the illusion of gaining something they've never had, right? Like, I don't know. You kind of live all over the world, but I live in the United States where like the American dream is like starting a business, becoming wealthy, like living the life you want to live. Everyone essentially has the ability to go ahead and do that. Like there's nothing stopping them from doing that, but people stop pursuing it at a certain point. Or maybe they're not properly motivated by that. They're more motivated by, like, I'm very much the same as you. Like I'm motivated by the fear of losing what I've obtained. Or like I've been in some pretty shitty places. Like the fear of going back to those places is a more impactful motivator than the possibility of gaining unlimited wealth. So the thing that drives me more so than the illusion or the possibility of, becoming a billionaire is just not having to go through the hardships that I've gone through in the past. Right. So and I think somewhere along that spectrum, everyone is somewhere, they have a level of comfortability along that spectrum that they're like, you know what, this is okay. Like a complacency along the way. And I think that exists in everyone to some degree at some point. Maybe some people, it's much further than what they'll ever be able to obtain. So they'll be in pursuit of that forever. I think some people, they get a job at the bank and they make 85,000 a year and they can support their wife and their two kids. Like I think they get to that level of comfortability where, you know what, they're okay. And there is like a satisfaction fulfillment component to this that I think is parallel along this entire conversation that does drive someone's motivating factor to like, how hard am I going to work? And like, not saying the guy that works at the bank doesn't and has two kids, like he's probably got a hard life. He's got a hard life in different ways that I'm unwilling to make my life hard, but that's also in pursuit of a different end goal, right? So I think that, whatever it is, I think moving away from the situation you don't want to be in is always going to be a more impactful motivator for you to do things that you don't want to do than moving towards something that you could possibly have.
So you're saying everyone's got to go to Dallas, Pennsylvania at least once a year, is what I'm hearing.
That is a huge motivating factor
I
for me.
know.
Every
I
time I
know.
leave that place, I'm like, you know what? You're doing okay. Keep doing what you're doing.